How's it going? I'm Kozak with Kozak Outdoors, and today on this mini episode we're going to be going over Texas rigs. Probably the most versatile type of bass fishing rig that currently exists. Shallow water, deep water, bare bank, rock, grass, you name it, you can fish a Texas rig in it if you set your Texas rig up in the right way. Things you'll need: a fishing rod. It can be spinning or a bait caster, either one. I prefer a 7 foot to 7'2" medium heavy bait casting rod for most of my Texas rigging. If I'm going to a more finesse, if it's a very clear water or very high pressured area, I might go down to a medium heavy spinning rod with 8 to 10 pound test and a very light weight. But for 99.9% of the time, my Texas rigs are being thrown on a medium heavy 7 foot bait casting rod. I've got this paired up with a 7-to-1 gear ratio. This is a Fluger President reel, 7-to-1 gear ratio. I like the higher speed because there are times when I will kind of use this to flip up into very shallow cover, kind of use it as a multi-use, both Texas rig and flipping type setup. So I've got a high speed reel, or a higher than normal speed reel, and it's paired with a Powell Max 3D. I love Powell rods. It is super sensitive. This one is 7'2", medium heavy, extra fast action. You're gonna need a hook, a plastic bait, and typically a weight, although it's not always necessary. As far as hooks go, I prefer a 4/0 Gamakatsu wide gap EWG hook. I use a 4/0 for essentially every Texas rig that I use. You can go down to a 3/0, a 2/0, even a 1/0, and you can go up to a 5/0 if you're using a large worm. But for your typical 4 to 6.5 or 7 inch creature or worm bait, a 4/0 is all you really need. So I am stocked up on 4/0 hooks. And then for a plastic, we're gonna go through a couple of them today, but something like a creature bait, this is the Guggen Squad, the Guggen Baits Bandito Bug. I think it's like 4.5 inches long. That's kind of this is like your average size of your creature baits on the market right now. As far as a weight goes, I prefer to use tungsten weights. Tungsten weights are smaller in profile and much more sensitive than your typical brass or lead weights. You can feel what you are dragging your bait over. A lot of times I'll get my bites when I'm dragging through sand and then I feel it turn into gravel or rock. I'll slow down that drag and just kind of twitch a little bit, and that's usually where the fish will be hiding, is in that transitional area. So having tungsten and a sensitive rod can help you feel more bites and get your bait to where the fish are. Weight sizes, I wouldn't go lower than 1/8. That may be what you need to do at times. I typically use 1/4 ounce up to 1/2 ounce when it comes to Texas rigs. Usually I go in between there with a 3/8 ounce weight. To set up a Texas rig, you can either choose to use no weight, in which case you will just tie your hook directly to your line, or you can choose to use a weight, in which case you will first string your weight onto your line and then attach your hook. You can also peg your weight, and what that'll do is you can buy a bobber stopper, put it up the line, and that will stop the weight from being able to travel further up the line. You'll want to use that if you're fishing around trees that have a lot of smaller branches where you don't want your line wrapping around them at all different areas. It makes it a much more compact and weedless setup when you're using a pegged weight. For the purpose of today, we are just going to do a 3/8 ounce weight tied onto a 4/0 hook. If you don't know how to tie on a hook onto the line, I use 2 different types of knots, Palomar and I think what's called a fisherman's knot. I'm not even sure. For a Palomar, the easiest way I found to do it, come through the eye and come back through the eye. This leaves you with a loop on one end and a tag end and your main line on the other. Take the loop Just like the first step in tying your shoes. Do the little over-under. Pull that tight down to the hook eye. With the loop that's left on the back side, you should have a loop in one hand still, and the tag end and your main line in the other. Take that loop it around the hook or the bait, whatever you have tied on. This knot works on almost anything. Loop it around the hook and then pull the tag end and the main line tight. You're going to want to lube up the knot area with saliva. That prevents the line from actually cutting into itself and burning itself while you're pulling it tight. Pull it all the way down and trim off your tag end. And what you have should look something like that. Now, the way that you put your plastic on the hook is technically what the Texas rig is. So to Texas rig your plastic, take the point of the hook and the head of your plastic, come straight down into the plastic, about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. Pop the hook out the bottom side of the bait, thread the nose of the bait up the hook till it covers the eye of the hook. So your bottom should look like that, and the top of the bait is covering the eye of the hook. And you can kind of eyeball it, or you can be very precise and line the back end of this bend up with the bait so you can tell where it's going to be coming out. And then insert the point of the hook into the bottom of the bait. And there's two different ways to do this at this point. You can either pull it all the way through like I did, but this isn't very weedless. So what I like to do is what's called skin hooking. And I just kind of like pushed the plastic up a little bit and then covered the hook point with it. This makes it completely weedless. Another thing you can do, and I'm not a fan of this, is when you're pushing the hook through, don't come all the way through. Right before your hook point is about to come out of the plastic, you just straighten it out, and now it is in there. It's essentially the same effect. I've just found that I have a better hookup ratio when I poke the hook all the way through and then skin hook it on the other side. So now we're going to go through and I'm going to show you what the Texas rig looks like in the water. And that way, if you don't live in an area that's very clear water, you may not know what your bait looks like. And I find that when I know what my bait is doing down there, when I know how to work it to get the most out of the action, I'm more confident, and confidence catches fish. Now I'm going to show you the Strike King Rage Tail Structure Bug, I think it's called, in June bug color. This is the standard size. They now make a mini version as well as a magnum version. Standard, you're looking at another 4-inch bait. Very similar to the Guggen Squad's Bandito bug, but this has a little bit more action, which you'll see in the footage. And to me, there's a time for each of them. When the fish are a little bit more finicky and don't really want all that much action, throw the Bandito bug. When they're very active, feeding up, I'll throw the structure bug. But honestly, I prefer, and I probably throw the structure bug 75% of the time, and then Bandito bug the other 25%. what you'll notice is that the structure bug doesn't stand up as well on its own in the water. So you really have to impart the action. You have to actually lift it up and drag it. Whereas the bandito bug, almost just naturally, the appendages will flare up. You really have to move it in order to get those legs and stuff imparting a lot of action in the water. So it's a much better bait to toss out there and just like pop it once or twice off the bottom and then just let it sit there if you're on some rock or something. Whereas the structure bug is something that I almost continuously move, whether it's being dragged across the bottom or I'm hopping it off the bottom. To me, the bandito bug is more of a passive type bait where you don't have to do as much. It's a little bit easier to use, whereas the structure bug is something you have to actively move. So I've got a passive bait and an active bait. All right, now we're gonna go for a zoom trick worm. This is like the most classic plastic bait. This is the Scupper Nong candy color. This is a super salt plus trick worm. A little bit more salt in the bait means it's gonna have a little bit more float to it, and it's gonna be a little bit slower sinking. But it will also add weight to the bait so you can cast it further. This bait is what started the whole addiction to fishing for me. Just Texas rigging this. I used to throw it weightless. Now I like putting a little like 1/4 ounce weight on it, and you'll see why. It is just very natural looking, can't be beat. You can throw this on so many different types of rigs that we'll cover in other episodes, but right now I'm gonna show you what it looks like on a Texas rig. And we're just rigging this the same way with the hook as we did with the creature baits. I got the hook eye covered by the nose of the bait. Hook goes through a few inches down, and then I've got it skin hooked so that it's weedless. So stay tuned for some footage of this trick worm doing a little underwater dancing. Well, I hope that footage and explanation helps at least one person out there catch some more fish. Texas rigs can be thrown in shallow water and deep water and everything in between. Heavy cover, bare banks, rocky banks, gravel, whatever you can find, you can throw a Texas rig at it. If you're fishing heavy weeds, I suggest going to a lighter weight so that your Texas rig can actually sit on top of the weed bed. You don't want to be fishing like on top water with it, but if you've got weeds that are a foot or two under the water and they're kind of matted up, throw a lighter weight or a weightless and it'll sit on top of those weeds, and you can still do action like I was doing, except it'll be on right over the weed bed and fish will come out of the matted weeds and actually hit that bait. If you're fishing deeper, I suggest going to a heavier weight, but you still want to try to keep your weights under 1/2 ounce. Typically your sensitive Texas rig rods are not going to be well equipped to handle 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce weights, so you really want to keep it under 1/2 ounce, which should be plenty. My preferred range to throw a Texas rig is 4 to 12 feet, with kind of that middle area being really where they tend to shine. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions about Texas rigging, or there's any other rigs out there that you don't fully understand or want some further explanation on, or just want to see underwater footage of, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. It'll be right here on the side of the screen, that little fish icon. Click on that, subscribe. There's more episodes to come. Thank you for watching Kozak Outdoors. Stay tuned.